Years after leaving her, the millionaire CEO walked into her cafe. Then her girl looked up and said, "Daddy?" The rain tapped steadily against the windows of the small seaside cafe, painting the glass in streams of silver. Inside, the warm hum of conversation and the scent of fresh coffee created a quiet refuge from the storm. A bell above the door jingled softly each time a new customer stepped in, shaking water from their coats and settling into the cozy space. Behind the counter, Chloe moved with practiced ease, balancing a tray of drinks while offering tired but sincere smiles to the regulars. Her blonde hair was tied in a loose ponytail, strands escaping to frame a face that held more exhaustion than her 26 years should allow. Yet there was something gentle in her eyes, something that softened even the hardest day. At a small table near the window sat a little girl with curly blonde hair and wide blue eyes, a box of crayons spread before her. Jessica, 4 years old, hummed to herself as she colored a sunflower in the middle of a storm. Every so often, she glanced toward her mother, watching her with quiet curiosity. Outside, the rain grew heavier. The door opened again, this time letting in a tall man in a dark gray suit, damp around the edges from the downpour. He carried himself with calm confidence, the kind born of boardrooms and airport lounges. His name was John Grant, 28, CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the country. He had not intended to stop here. It was just a detour on a business trip, a coastal drive to clear his mind. But the rain had forced him into the nearest cafe. He stepped inside, brushed the water from his shoulders, and looked around for a place to sit. His eyes met Chloe's for a brief second, too quick for recognition, and she gave him a polite nod before turning back to her tray. Jessica stopped coloring. Her eyes locked onto the man near the door. She stared at him, her little brow furrowing, then relaxing, as if something inside her quietly clicked into place. She slid off her chair without a word, clutching her crayon in one hand. John found a seat near the window, his phone already in hand as he checked messages. He did not notice the child approaching. Jessica stood beside him for a moment, silent. Then, softly, just loud enough for him to hear, she asked, "Are you my daddy?" John's head snapped up. He looked down at the little girl, startled, unsure if he had heard her correctly. Her big blue eyes searched his face, waiting for something, anything. Chloe, walking toward another table with a tray of coffee, caught the sound of her daughter's voice. She turned just in time to see Jessica standing beside the stranger. Then she heard the words again, a little louder this time. "Are you my daddy?" The tray slipped from Chloe's hands. It hit the floor with a crash, coffee spilling across the wood and cups rolling away. The cafe went silent. A few people turned to look. Chloe stood frozen, her heart thundering, her gaze locked with John's, and this time, the recognition hit. John blinked, confused, looking from the child to the woman across the room, his brow furrowed. Jessica looked up at him again, tilting her head. "You look like the man in Mommy's picture," she whispered. John opened his mouth to speak but said nothing. Chloe took a shaky breath, eyes wide, the color draining from her face. And outside, the rain kept falling. Chloe could not move. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum, deafening everything around her. The sound of the tray hitting the floor, the whisper of Jessica's question, John's stunned expression, it all swirled around her like a dream she never expected to relive. She felt her knees weaken, and then, as if her mind could no longer bear the weight of the present, the world around her blurred, and she was pulled back into a memory, to a time when everything was different. It was 5 years ago. Spring sunlight filtered through the old university windows, warming the backs of students seated on the library lawn. Chloe sat cross-legged on the grass, a notebook open on her lap, her blonde hair shimmering in the sunday. She was scribbling poetry in the margins of her textbook when a familiar shadow fell across the page. "Is this how brilliant minds waste their time?" John teased, lowering himself beside her. She rolled her eyes but smiled. "Better than watching you fall asleep in economics class." John laughed, that deep, easy laugh she loved so much. He reached into the bag beside him and pulled out a small white lily, handing it to her with an almost boyish grin. "For the girl who makes even silence sound poetic." He always said things like that, and even though Chloe had grown up learning not to trust sweet words, somehow, with John, she believed every single one. They were inseparable. Between classes and deadlines, they carved out a world of their own. A world of late-night ramen, handwritten notes, and long walks under string lights that hung across the campus courtyard. John never treated her like someone who had less, not when everyone else seemed to see her only as the scholarship girl. With him, she felt seen, truly seen. But love, no matter how genuine, could not always silence the world around it. John's father, Richard Grant, made his disapproval known the first time he met Chloe. He did not raise his voice or use cruel words. He simply looked at her, and in that one look, stripped her of every bit of worth she thought she had earned. "She's a distraction," he later told John, "and distractions ruin men who are meant to lead." At first, John pushed back. He told Chloe that nothing would come between them, that he would never let his father dictate his future. But as the months wore on, the pressure mounted. Richard orchestrated an opportunity for John to join the company's European expansion team, a prestigious role, one that would prepare him to eventually take over the entire business. It was everything his father had groomed him for. Refusing it would mean burning every bridge with the Grant Empire. 1 week before graduation, John met Chloe under their favorite tree near the library. He did not smile this time. "I leave for London in 4 days, he said quietly. Her breath caught. 4 days? What about everything we planned?" "I tried, Chloe. I swear I tried." Tears welled in her eyes. "So, that's it? After everything, you just leave?" John looked away, jaw clenched. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "I wrote you something," he said. "I can't find the words when I look at you." He kissed her forehead, gently, one last time. Then he turned and walked away. Chloe sat beneath that tree for hours, holding the letter, unopened. The white lily he once gave her had dried between the pages of her notebook. She had believed in forever. But forever, it seemed, had an expiration date. The days after John left blurred into one long ache. 2 weeks later, Chloe realized her body felt different. She had chalked it up to stress, the sleepless nights, the tears, the way her heart hadn't stopped aching since he walked away. But the morning nausea, the missed cycle, it all added up to one terrifying truth. She was pregnant. Panic gripped her. She sat on the bathroom floor with the test in her hand, breath shallow, mind racing. The silence in the apartment was deafening. There was no one to call, no voice to steady her. Her fingers trembled as she opened her laptop and typed out an email to John. Then another, and another. Each one more desperate, more fragile than the last. She waited days, then a week. Still, nothing. She went to his family's estate, only to learn the Grants had left for Europe. She tried the company. No answers. To the world, John Grant had vanished, and with him, every thread of the life she once imagined. One night, Chloe sat alone on her bed, city lights flickering through the window. Her hand rested on her lower belly, not yet showing, but already so heavy with responsibility. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered to the child she hadn't planned for but could not abandon. "You're all I have left of the love we shared," she said, "and I'll protect you, no matter what it costs me." She dropped out of college quietly, never returning to campus. No celebration, no cap and gown, no goodbyes, just silence. With no family to turn to, her parents had passed away years ago in a car accident. Chloe packed what little she owned and moved to a quiet coastal town where no one knew her past. She found work at a small cafe, rented a modest one-bedroom apartment above an old bookstore, and started over. When her daughter was born, Chloe held her close and cried harder than she ever had in her life. She named her Jessica, after the white lilies John once gave her beneath the university tree. A quiet tribute to something once beautiful, even if it was no longer hers. Jessica became her world. As the years passed, Chloe built a routine, mornings making pancakes in their tiny kitchen, afternoons at the cafe, evenings filled with bedtime stories and lullabies sung off-key. Her life was simple, but full of purpose. Jessica, with her curious eyes and gentle spirit, was a kind-hearted child. She asked questions, sometimes too many, and Chloe always tried to answer them with grace. The hardest question came one night as they sat together on the old armchair, a photo album in Jessica's lap. "Mommy," Jessica asked, pointing at a faded photo of John, "who is this man you always look at?" Chloe's throat tightened. She had known the question would come eventually. "That's someone Mommy used to love," she said softly, "and someone who loved Mommy very much." "Is he my daddy?" Jessica asked, eyes wide and innocent. Chloe nodded, tears brimming. "He had to go far away," she said, "very far." Jessica blinked slowly, taking it in the way only a child could. She didn't ask why, not yet. Each night after, Jessica would glance at the picture Chloe kept on the bedside table, the same one Chloe stared at when she thought her daughter was asleep. And Chloe, though she had long learned to be strong, never stopped missing what could have been. Not the wealth or the dreams, but the love, the safety, the man who once made her feel like she belonged in a world that never quite made space for her. She had never dated again, not because there were no offers, but because her heart simply refused to move on. It had rooted itself in a memory, a time when someone saw her for more than where she came from. Sometimes, watching Jessica play with sunlight in her hair, Chloe would think, "You have his eyes, his spirit, his strength." Then she'd smile, though her chest ached, and whisper, "If you ever meet him, you'll know, because your eyes will recognize his." And so, Chloe lived, quietly, lovingly, with the weight of love lost, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, life hadn't said its last word. John sat at the corner table, his mind spinning. The little girl's words echoed in his head like a broken record. "Are you my daddy?" He looked over at her. She had returned to her chair, quietly coloring, but her eyes kept drifting toward him, curious, searching, like she knew something the adults hadn't yet said aloud. He turned his gaze to the counter. Chloe stood there. Her blonde hair was tucked behind her ears, her eyes fixed downward, fingers clenched around the glass in her hand. She hadn't said a word. Not to him, not to Jessica. She moved automatically, picked up another glass, poured water, placed it on a tray. Then she turned and walked over to his table, placing the glass down without a word. Their hands brushed. John froze. Chloe's eyes flicked up for only a second, just long enough for him to see the storm behind them, before she turned away. "Wait," he said quietly. She paused but didn't turn back. Before she could walk away, Jessica tugged gently on John's sleeve. "My mommy has a picture of you," she said. "She looks at it every night. She thinks I don't see, but I do." John's breath caught. "She said you were her favorite person once," Jessica added before returning to her coloring. John's throat tightened. He looked at Chloe again. Really looked. The subtle tremble in her fingers, the weight in her posture, the silence around her that had once been filled with laughter. Then, he stood slowly. "Chloe," he said, his voice hoarse. "Is it really you?" She turned to him, their eyes locking. For a heartbeat, the years disappeared. The cafe, the rain, the distance, gone. It was just them, like it used to be. Her lips parted, but she struggled to speak. "Yes," she whispered, "it's me." Silence stretched between them. Chloe finally looked down at Jessica, then crossed the room and knelt beside her. "Jessica," she said softly, "remember when you asked me about your daddy?" Jessica nodded. Chloe looked back at John. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "This is him, John. He's your father." The air seemed to freeze. John staggered back slightly, the truth slamming into him with more force than he expected. He looked from Chloe to Jessica, saw the eyes, the curve of the cheeks, the quiet strength in both. It was all there. Jessica tilted her head. "You are really him?" John lowered himself into the chair slowly, his knees weak. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe past the sudden, overwhelming weight in his chest. He had missed so much. 4 years. Her first smile. Her first steps, her first words. He had a daughter, and he had never known. Across the table, Chloe watched him, her face pale, not angry, just tired and sad. Finally, John found his voice. "You never told me," he said, barely above a whisper. Her lips quivered. "I tried." That simple answer hit harder than anything else. He looked down again at Jessica, still coloring, still watching him out of the corner of her eye. And then, up at Chloe. Something shifted between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. A truth that could no longer be ignored. A beginning neither of them expected. The cafe had closed for the night. Outside, the rain had eased into a soft drizzle, leaving the streets slick and glistening under the dim glow of the streetlights. Inside, the smell of coffee still lingered. The chairs were turned upside down, and the floor had been swept clean. Chloe stood in the narrow kitchen at the back, arms folded tightly across her chest, staring at the tiled floor. Her heart hadn't slowed since she told John the truth. She heard him behind her but couldn't bring herself to turn around. John leaned against the counter, his jacket draped over a stool, sleeves rolled up. Neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the hum of the fridge and the soft creaks of the old pipes. Finally, he broke the silence. "I didn't know." Chloe let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't know? I wrote to you, emailed you dozens of times. I went to your house, your office. You vanished." His brow furrowed. "My father." He paused, then tried again. "He had everything routed through his office when I left. My phone, email, mail, filtered. He said it was for security while I was in Europe. But really, he cut me off from everyone outside the company. When I asked about you, he said you'd moved on. He made sure I couldn't reach you." Chloe's arms folded tighter. "I thought you chose to leave us. I thought you knew and didn't care." "Fucked. I swear," John said, his voice cracking. "I didn't know. If I had, God, Chloe, if I had known." He ran a hand through his hair. "I was 23. I didn't know how to fight him, but I tried to find you. I asked everyone. You were just gone. So..." Tears welled in her eyes. "I wasn't gone," she whispered. "I was right here, alone, waiting for you." He took a step forward but didn't touch her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for everything you went through." Chloe shook her head, wiping her face. "Sorry doesn't undo 4 years. It doesn't stop Jessica from asking where her father is." At the sound of her name, they both looked over. Jessica was asleep on a bench, her head resting on John's jacket. She had crawled onto his lap earlier and drifted off before they even began talking. Now she slept peacefully, one tiny hand tucked beneath her cheek. John walked over and sat beside her, carefully pulling her into his lap. He held her gently, brushing a curl from her forehead. "She's so small," he whispered. "So perfect." Chloe watched him, her chest tightening. For the first time since his return, she didn't see the man who had left, but the one who could have stayed. The one holding their daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world. John looked up at her, eyes damp. "I don't want to lose either of you again. I've missed enough." He pulled a business card from his pocket. On the back, he scribbled a single line in neat handwriting. "I don't ever want to lose you again." He set it on the counter beside her. Then, from his briefcase, he pulled out a small stuffed bear, soft, cream-colored, with a red ribbon. He placed it gently beside Jessica. It looked comically small in his hand. "She can have it when she wakes up," he said softly. Chloe didn't speak. She stared at the card and the bear, arms still crossed. But something in her shifted, just enough, like a door slowly creaking open. John held Jessica close, his thumb brushing her hair. The kitchen fell silent again. But this silence wasn't empty. It felt like something waiting to begin. John did not leave the next day, or the next. Instead, he extended his stay under the pretense of surveying regional investments, feeding just enough corporate jargon to the board to justify his absence. In truth, he had no business in this sleepy seaside town, except the unfinished one that sat squarely in his heart. Every morning, John returned to the cafe. He arrived just after opening, rolled up his sleeves, and asked Chloe, always gently, never assuming, if she needed help. At first, she hesitated, but he persisted in the smallest ways, stacking chairs, wiping tables, charming even the grumpiest regulars with easy conversation and a surprising knack for remembering everyone's coffee order. He made himself useful. More importantly, he made himself present. After school, he walked Jessica home, her small hand gripping his finger tightly as she told him about snack time and paint colors and the mean boy who stole her glue. They built puzzles together. He read her bedtime story, and once, in a moment that surprised them both, she climbed into his lap without asking. The town noticed. Customers whispered behind menus. The young waitress giggled. The elderly man who came in every Thursday with a crossword said it out loud. That man's got the look of a father finally making up for lost time. Chloe heard it all, and she watched. She watched John from the kitchen door as he tied an apron for the 5th time that week, watched him crouch to fix Jessica's shoelaces, watched how he never pushed too hard, never demanded space that wasn't freely given. Still, a part of her remained guarded, until the afternoon the fever came. It started with a cough. Then Jessica grew quiet, pressing her cheek against the table, saying she felt floaty. Chloe knelt beside her, panic rising as she touched her daughter's forehead, burning hot. "I need to get her to the hospital," Chloe whispered, heart racing. "But I don't have the car, and the buses." John was already taking off his jacket. "Give her to me." "What? Now, Chloe." She hesitated for only a second before lifting Jessica into his arms. John pulled off his vest, wrapped it around her like a blanket, and burst through the cafe doors into the storm. The rain had returned with a vengeance, but he didn't slow. He ran. Jessica clutched to his chest, shoes soaked, breath heavy, determination etched into every line of his face. At the hospital, he barked instructions to the receptionist, then called his personal physician to meet them. Chloe arrived minutes later, drenched and shaking. By the time she reached the room, Jessica was resting on the hospital bed, cheeks flushed, her small body swallowed by blankets. And beside her, still in his soaked shirt, sat John, his large hand wrapped gently around hers. He was telling her a story in a low, calming voice, something about a bear who lost his way but found his family again. He smiled, but Chloe saw the tremor in his jaw, the worry behind each word. Jessica stirred slightly, murmuring something. John leaned down, kissed her forehead. "Daddy's here now," he whispered. "I won't ever leave again." Chloe stood frozen in the doorway. Something cracked open inside her. Not grief, not anger. Those had carved their places long ago. No, this was something older, deeper. A memory of who he had been, and a vision of who he might become. John looked up. Their eyes met. "I'm sorry," he said, voice steady but full, "for not being there when you needed me most, but if you'll let me, I won't miss another moment." Chloe stepped forward slowly, eyes never leaving his. She reached for a towel, gently pressed it to Jessica's forehead, then without a word, placed her other hand on John's shoulder. The smallest touch, but it said everything. The next morning, John was already in the kitchen when Chloe and Jessica came down. He stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, the same cinnamon pancakes Chloe used to rave about in college. Jessica climbed onto her stool with a sleepy grin, still pale but recovering. John placed a plate in front of her. "Taste test, chef." Jessica took one bite, eyes lighting up. "Daddy makes the best pancakes," she declared. Chloe laughed, soft, sudden, unfiltered, and then the tears came, not from sadness, but from something she hadn't felt in years. Relief, hope, and maybe the beginning of home. The peaceful rhythm they had built did not last long. It was a Saturday morning when the sleek black car rolled up outside the cafe. Chloe was refilling the sugar jars when the door swung open and a tall man in an expensive coat stepped inside, his presence casting a shadow across the cheerful space. Richard Grant, John's father. Chloe recognized him instantly. Older than she remembered from a photo John once showed her at university, but unmistakably powerful. His eyes scanned the room, sharp and calculating, before landing on her. He gave a tight, polite nod, then turned as John walked in from the back kitchen. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Richard said, "We need to talk." Later that day, John sat in the boardroom of his family's company, surrounded by executives in tailored suits. His father stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. "I gave you time," Richard said. "I let you disappear into whatever small-town fantasy you needed to work through. But it is time to come back." "I never left the company," John replied calmly. "Operations have continued. The board is satisfied." "The board does not matter," Richard snapped. "What matters is your legacy, your future. And she," his voice dipped into disdain, "does not belong in it." John stood, the weight of 4 years pressing into his spine. "You're talking about the mother of my child," he said. "She's a waitress," Richard scoffed. "A single mother. Do you think shareholders will respect you if this becomes your reality?" John's voice rose, not in anger, but in certainty. "Then let them walk away. Let the money go. I will not trade my family for a company. You're throwing away everything I built for you. For you, God." "No," John said. "I'm walking towards something I'm finally proud of." Back in the small apartment above the bookstore, Chloe sat at the kitchen table, clutching the edge of a note she had found in John's jacket pocket, one with the name of the board meeting and the address of the company headquarters. She had not meant to read it, but now that she She felt the ground shift beneath her. He was choosing her, and it terrified her. Jessica was in the other room, building a castle out of pillows. Chloe watched her, heart torn. John was giving up everything. His name, his inheritance, his legacy, and it was for her, for them. But she could not let him lose it all, not because of her. That night, after Jessica fell asleep, Chloe sat down with pen and paper. Her handwriting shook as she wrote, "John, you gave me more than I ever dreamed of by coming back, but I cannot let you lose everything for us. I love you too much to watch you burn your life down. Maybe in another life, we could have had both, but not this one. Please know I will never stop being grateful for what you've given Jessica. I'm taking her somewhere safe, where she won't be the reason her father loses everything." She folded the letter with trembling fingers and left it on the kitchen table beside the photo of the three of them taken just days ago. Then she packed a small bag, lifted Jessica into her arms, and slipped quietly into the night. The town was still sleeping. The rain had stopped. But for John, when he returned home and found the note, it felt like the storm had only just begun. John searched everywhere. He drove from town to town, asked strangers at bus stops, called every hospital, every friend, every person who might have seen Chloe and Jessica. Days passed without sleep. His phone battery died more than once from constant use. He kept her letter in his coat pocket, worn at the corners, reading it over and over like it might suddenly make sense. He refused to believe she was gone forever. One morning, just as the sun broke through a week-long stretch of clouds, he remembered a place, a small garden tucked behind the university campus, half wild and often forgotten. It had been their secret back then, a haven of color and silence where they'd sit under the wisteria trees and dream of things they never thought they would lose. He drove straight there. And there she was. Chloe sat on a weathered bench, her hair tied back loosely, hands resting in her lap. Jessica stood nearby, chasing a butterfly with bare feet in the grass. The sight made John stop in his tracks. For a moment, he simply watched, mother and daughter in the early morning light, like a painting he once imagined but never thought he'd see again. Chloe turned, sensing someone behind her. When she saw him, her face crumbled. Tears filled her eyes before she could speak. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I couldn't let you give everything up for me. I thought I was protecting you." John stepped closer, shaking his head. "You're not a burden, Chloe. You never were." She looked down, wiping her face with trembling fingers. "You had a life, a future. I didn't want to be the reason you lost it." John reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn velvet box. He knelt down in the grass, the way he should have done years ago. "This was supposed to be yours a long time ago," he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate silver ring. "I kept it. I carried it even when I thought I'd never see you again." Chloe's hand flew to her mouth. "You're not a burden," he said softly. "You're home." Jessica spotted him then and ran across the grass, laughing. "Daddy!" she cried, flinging her arms around his neck. He pulled her close with one arm, holding the ring with the other. "We're a family now," Jessica said, looking between them with innocent hope. John looked at Chloe. "Only if you'll have me." Chloe knelt beside them, tears streaming freely now, and nodded. She placed her hand over his. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Later that month, under a canopy of string lights and wildflowers by the sea, they stood together on the shore as the sun dipped low in the sky. Chloe wore a simple white dress that fluttered in the breeze. Jessica clutched a basket of petals, walking proudly ahead of them in a tiny lace dress. There were no grand speeches, no reporters, no headlines, only promises, only love. John lifted Jessica into his arms as they kissed, and the little girl giggled, wrapping her arms around both of their necks. The waves rolled in quietly, the breeze was soft and warm, and in that moment, bathed in golden light, surrounded by laughter and the scent of salt air, John knew with certainty that he hadn't lost anything. He had found everything. Thank you for watching this heartwarming journey of love, loss, and the power of second chances. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, don't forget to subscribe to the Soul Stirring Stories channel for more emotional, real-life inspired tales that heal, inspire, and stay with you long after the screen fades to black. And hey, if you felt a lump in your throat or a tear in your eye, Hit that hype button to show your support. Every click helps us keep telling stories that matter. Until next time, stay kind and never stop believing in love.